This movie's about a ship that sank. And this movie took the studio with it. The Titanic. The famous liner and the tragedy it suffered has been fodder for stories almost since the time it sank in 1912. Books, songs, and even TV shows have centered around the famous shipwreck, and movies are no exception. Of course, the 1997 movie was a mega blockbuster, but there were lots of other Titanic-based films before that one. Some good, some bad, and this time we're looking at one from 1980 called Raise the Titanic. The idea here is pretty much what it says on the tin, an effort to raise the ship from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. In the cast, Jason Robards plays an admiral, David Selby from Dark Shadows plays a government guy, we see Emmet Walsh, Ann Archer as a reporter, and even Paul Carr, who played Lee Kelso on Star Trek, is here as a CIA official. Sir Alec Guinness makes an appearance too, just before he worked on The Empire Strikes Back. Dirk Pitt is played by Richard Jordan, who was Francis in Logan's Run, among many other things. The story goes like this. The U.S. has come up with a new defense system that would make nuclear war from missiles obsolete. It would create a laser-based force field that would stop ICBMs in their tracks. Unfortunately, this system needs a lot of power, and the only thing powerful enough to run it is a rare, mythical, radioactive mineral called byzanium. This mineral is so rare it only existed on a tiny Arctic island controlled by the Soviet Union. But when they send an agent to check, it turns out the entire supply was already mined and spirited away by the U.S. in 1912. And they already knew byzanium was special and rare back then, so they wanted it. The government hired a guy to get the stuff, and he was shipping it to America on a commercial ship. Unfortunately, that ship turned out to be the Titanic. So the only supply of byzanium in the world is now resting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and the government wants to get hold of it. Here's where our hero comes in. Dirk Pitt, a sometimes government operative and adventurer who specializes in oceanography and stuff like that. He cooks up the idea of raising the ship, thus begins the quest to find the shipwreck and figure out how to raise the Titanic so they can get the mineral. The Russians already know about the defense system and figure out the US needs byzanium, and their spies fill in the details about the Titanic. So they're dogging the American effort to solve the mystery of the Titanic's resting place. Not giving anything away here, they find the Titanic and manage to raise the ship. And it's all quite impressive when they do. But does it work out or not? Well, you'll have to watch the movie for that answer. This was based on a novel by Clive Cussler, and Raise the Titanic was a big bestseller for him. True confession, I read the book when I was a kid. I got it right out of the library. And this is a book that really isn't for kids. It's kind of PG-13, if you know what I mean. And it's very different from the movie, which is kind of sanitized compared to the book. And of course, the book came out in 1976, before the Titanic was found. And the assumption was that it sank all in one piece, and the cold temperatures of the deep ocean would keep the ship from rusting and falling apart. Today, we know that not to be the case, so this movie is an artifact of its time that will never be remade. But you have to make allowances for that. when watching this one. Dirk Pitt was a regular character in Cussler's books, which appealed to the studio head who bought the rights. See, Lord Lou Grade, who founded the studio ITC, wanted to get into movies. We've talked about ITC before. They were behind lots of television series, like one of my favorites, Space 1999. Well, Grade wanted a franchise that would be ITC's version of the James Bond one. They saw Dirk Pitt as a hero they could use in a series of lucrative spy action movies. That didn't turn out so good. See, this movie was so expensive, ITC pretty much folded because of it. Well, this and a few other flops sealed the fate of the studio, and they had to give up making movies. One of the costs came from the model of the Titanic, which looks great. It was like 17 feet long, and because it was so big, the water tank they were going to use was too small to hold it. So they had to build a whole new water tank, which was super expensive. The costs wound up being almost as much as the original cost to build the Titanic itself back in the day. Lou Grade once famously said about Raise the Titanic that it would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic. I'll give the movie this. It doesn't look cheap. In fact, it looks pretty lavish. You can see the money right there on the screen, and John Barry delivers a fine Bondian score to boot. True, some of the effects are a bit dated, there's a few wonky matte shots, but overall, this one is pretty serviceable in the effects department. In fact, the Titanic breaking the surface is one of the most iconic moments in cinematic history. It's that good. Unfortunately, the cast and the script aren't that good. Well, Jason Robards is fine, as are Selby and Archer, but they're not the star of this picture. The guy playing Dirk Pitt is just not very convincing. Jordan comes off like a gob of cold, wet, soggy lasagna, just laying there on your plate, looking unappetizing and being very arrogant about it. He seems really miscast here, or poorly directed, because you can't see him as a spy or action guy or any of that. Director Jeremy Jameson had done a lot of TV and Airport 77, but it seems he was out of his element here. The movie isn't rubbish or anything. Everything is competent, but the movie is kinda slow, kinda ponderous. I still sorta like it, probably for the special effects and the overall concept. It's very imaginative, but you can see why the movie bombed. I'm giving this one 2 paws up. It's watchable, and the sequence of raising the ship is excellent. And then there's this shot. We see 3 iconic engineering marvels of their time, all in one frame. The Titanic, the Brooklyn Bridge, and those 2 skyscrapers. They even throw in the Goodyear blimp in this sequence. And sharp-eyed viewers will spot this toy figure pumping water when this ship is raised. The special effects team thought it would be a funny gag. So there's a lot of stuff to like as things go along, but somehow the movie lacks a sense of urgency the story really needed. The relationships between the characters are superficial at best, and even the Russians aren't any real threat. The direction is serviceable, but not very inspired, and Pitt is a real letdown, nothing like his literary counterpart. In the end, Cussler hated the movie. I'd say it's still worth checking out, though. Raise the Titanic was hard to get hold of for a long time, but today it's available on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and digitally from Amazon Prime. You can check out my review of another ITC movie here. And down here, you can watch some other reviews on the channel. You take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.